Exactly. Everybody's here. Hi everyone. I would like to welcome you first, and after exciting 2 days of a symposium, we're really excited to meet. It's a luxury nowadays to meet face to face. You all know that. Was missing for a while. And I'm really delighted that our lead organizers, Stephen, Deal and Martin Walker, are next to me. I don't know how they managed it, but there were over 40 speakers and moderators, and it was from different time zones, different countries, Singaporean, academic, congressman, Hollywood star, and ourselves. And it was really exciting. Nowadays, when you mention crypto, people all of a sudden think that it is a pro-crypto, or we're trying to lure you guys to invest in it. Actually, we're trying to show the danger around it and inform policymakers what they're really dealing with. And I'm really happy to be part of this journey. I learned a lot myself. Certain things were same, things I thought I know, but it was different perception. Myself is an engineer and one of the organizers as well. Obviously, when I say engineer, not Stephen Deal level, but I'm getting there. It's good to remember I have a degree as well, time to time. So today it's not like a panel or something. We just want to have a chat and then congratulate ourselves and you being here as crypto skeptics and everyone else. So Stephen will introduce the rest of, and why actually he did this. I'm just wondering, I don't know why. So, any comments? That's easy though.
So I want to thank everybody for coming out on this Tuesday evening to talk about their shared crypto skepticism. This is actually the first event of its kind where we're actually gathering like-minded crypto skeptics to meet in person, talk about what we think is the right path forward. And I don't know if you've seen the end of the symposium that we announced the foundation that we're going to be starting, which is going to focus on regulatory issues around emerging technologies. So crypto skepticism is only getting more organized and more formalized. We all recognize the need for there to be definitely more action from our regulators, and we need to create the political will in our democracy. Bring about. That's really what this conference was really about. And I'm really gracious to Martin for helping organize us all. And we want to thank all of our sponsors, central banks, our puppet masters, and the Illuminati for helping fund all of this. We couldn't have done it without them. So I really want to thank you all for being here. I know it means a lot. Or maybe you're actually just all here for the free booze, but either way, I'm really grateful for everybody showing up and supporting us. So we have a little impromptu panel between some of the organizers, and I'm handing over to Jan, and we'll have a nice conversation. Thank you.
David. David Gerard?
Ran out. We'd be able to see it if I was saying this.
We would be able to see it if he was here. I think he's in the back. He's in the road. Just give him 2 minutes. Sorry about that.
Somebody like to take the
Just, I don't know how to answer this question, but I'm asking the same thing in a way that why a policy symposium? Why did you convince us all to be here and do it and be crusaders everywhere?
I mean, for me, there's, if you look at the stats, I think it was a Bloomberg article that showed there was more lobbyists in the United States Congress and dollars spent for lobbying for crypto than anything else. So there clearly needs to be something, at least even if it's just information that's out there, to kind of give a rational argument against it, even if there's no money behind it.
Yeah, I mean, there are hundreds of crypto conferences where you basically have a giant echo chamber of people all promoting sort of highly speculative assets to the public, and it's very rare that you hear the contrarian voice. Usually when we want to do panels, we sit on the panel, it's 4 or 5 other lobbyists, and they all say the craziest things. lobbies, and then we're seeing them pulling our hair out, basically being like, well, just up is down, left is right. And this is the first conference where like we're sitting on a panel full of like 4 sort of fairly rational voices talking about what I consider mainstream economics and sensible monetary policy and not some sort of fringe system. So that's really what we're trying to
in terms of policy, I think crypto industry has been creating unreality bubble now very intensively for the last few years, and we're just trying to actually just bring people back to reality. And that's where things really happen. It's in the regulators, it's in the legal system, it's in politics. They're the key people, as well as the general public. We have to shape their views. I think many of us have been trying for a very long time to have rational arguments with people in the crypto industry. It just doesn't work. They're too bought into it. And there's like thousands and thousands of people whose living depends solely on crypto, and it doesn't matter what you say anymore. You just get ludicrous responses because that's where their income comes.
This is a really easy question. What would make a difference between a crypto skeptic and a crypto bro?
I mean, you mean the difference?
Yes, like in your opinion, just a quick one.
I mean, being even a student of history or battery life. Then yeah, I mean, just understanding, like, I can't believe the stuff I see on Twitter, like, Michael Saylor saying that, it's like new energy, restoring energy. It doesn't do that. It's ridiculous. It's like literally common sense is the difference between a crypto skeptic and a crypto bro. Is there a red light?
Should we just talk loudly?
Yeah.
Let's
Just
talk
shout.
loudly.
Just shout.
Let's just talk loudly. Well, I have to say, I know lots of people at cryptocurrencies, and most of them are just perfectly normal people, just having a flutter. But most of them are perfectly normal people who are just having a flutter on cryptocurrencies. They're not bought into some big crypto's going to take over the world. And most people who are skeptical about crypto are very normal people, but they typically have some domain knowledge in technology and economics, whatever. Ludicrous. But if you were to pick the extremes of crypto bro, extreme crypto skeptic, actually they look very similar. I would say that the big difference, just taking the average, is the crypto bro likes talking about software and code, but the actual real hardcore crypto skeptic code.
A good point, Ryan.
On top of that, I mean, Stephen, what do you think the innovation they're representing then? I mean, the skeptic is the real coder. You're one of them.
isn't much crypto. Apart from that, spoken. Skeptics. And the curtain. Not much.
And when we talk about innovation, we have to look at what that actually means. It's a word that's very easily thrown about, especially in like Silicon Valley. And innovation really means you're making something better, whether it's faster, quality, or there's some metric that you have to measure it by. If you can build the same thing without blockchain or crypto in the normal traditional sense, and it's actually faster and better and more secure, then that's not innovation. It's just hype.
So would you guys think that it's one of the million of reasons that the regulators acted slow? Because first of all, the innovation, the buzzword around it and the marketing, but then what in reality technology?
Yeah, I think
Well, if you look at the history of bad innovation, including the type that drove widespread support, you actually saw in the .0 and the financial one of the core characteristics of that is obscuring what you're doing, adding in complexity which isn't really necessary. So this is something that's been running through, a theme that's been running through the bad side of finance for at least 20 years now. Crypto has basically taken the same approach of creating obscurity and unnecessary complexity. That's really confused the regulators, because you take that the financial side of complexity, added on this great big layer of unnecessary. Well, I can understand why many of the regulators actually struggled up with it.
On top of that, I think I would like to add that when you and others compare it to the dot-com bubble, at least in dot-com bubble, they were just inefficient businesses. So I think it's not fair to compare dot-com bubble and crypto bubble, because at the end of the day, the Luna holders has nothing now. But if you just bought a furniture in the old days, you at least had the furniture at the end of that. A bad stock, not bad thing.
I think the word innovation gets thrown around a lot. One of those words where everybody loves innovation. I think politicians don't want to be stifled. And the problem is that you can wrap basically anything in this kind of aura of innovation, even if there's absolutely nothing there, empty abstract. And the problem with crypto is that, like, in the absence of there being kind of a large thing to invest in, a lot of people try to create this kind of bubble because nothing else. Monetary policy here contributed a little bit to that, but I think crypto is more or less going to be regarded the same way that South Sea bubble. There's nothing there.
Now, as we mentioned, the regulators and in the US, obviously, I just wondered how you think effective is the crypto lobbyists are in the sense of delaying the necessary regulations to be implemented.
So it's interesting because of what Martin said, and it's exactly right. Even though they're throwing a lot of money at it, these lobbyists are still using big superfluous words, complicated words, and it's either that the actual congressman will be like, oh, I'm too dumb to understand this, so therefore you must be right, or they're like, oh, I don't understand what you're saying, and it sounds like you're bullshitting me, because I am a politician.
Fortunately, I take a very bleak view. I think that the crypto lobby is actually being very effective. You need to only look at the amount of money that's flowing into it with the SEC filings, and not at the federal level, at the state level in the United States. Massive amounts of money are being spent to, like, basically have the crypto lobby write the rules in Wyoming, in Texas, in Virginia. And it turns out basically politicians are not that really expensive to buy, especially at the state level. And a 20K check in the United States can go a very long way. Oftentimes, these kind of policies get shipped by a 1 or 2K donation to one politician at the right time. You look at the kind of like the Loomis Gillibrand bill that's going through the U.S. House, which is basically bespoke legislation written by the crypto lobby to get them everything they want, and basically create a regulatory environment in which crypto is completely deregulated and consumers have no protections. That's what they want. They really want the FTC to be the regulator of choice, and they're slowly kind of getting their way in Capitol Hill because they're pulling money into it. Money talks in Washington. So that's why this conference exists, kind of, help speak directly to some of the staffers and some of the politicians and say, don't listen to the lobbyists, because there's this whole other group of people who are your constituents that think differently than these people. And there needs to be this kind of counter narrative to the crypto lobby. And I'm certainly going to keep working on sort of grassroots lobbying on this.
Yeah, I think they've definitely been having an impact. You can see that not just in the US, but also in Europe as well. That's one of the things we were talking about earlier. I think if you actually look at some of the papers and the documents that have come out of government organisations around the world, it's not just where they've actually had an impact. Legislation having started to have an impact. It's actually where they're actually starting, well, for a few years now, they've actually been having a major impact on what you might call thought leadership, shaping policy the emptiness of most of the arguments they make gives me hope. It won't take that many people just using facts, logic, evidence to actually dispel the illusion.
On top of that, I would like to add that if you check the parliamentary groups and their meeting schedules, you would see that some FCA unregulated exchanges bosses are meeting with our politicians and our people that we elected, so it sounds a bit scary. Hopefully we'll not end up there. I just wonder, Stephen, you always call cryptocurrency investments a zero-sum game. I think I don't agree with you, it's a negative-sum game because is the exchange makes money on that. But I wonder where this money that's been made and people speak about comes from.
So crypto, unlike any other financial asset, has no income. It's a financial product that trades purely on the theory of the greater fool, right? Imagine if you create a shell company and you start selling shares in the shell company, something that flows in or out of that company, right? Now you can trade the shares. We did that in 1700s, well, South Sea Bubble actually. We didn't end well. But any money that one person makes is money that another person lost, right? And then we take into effect that there's like transaction fees, like there are actually multiple losers for every one winner. So there's no money flowing into crypto that doesn't flow, there's no money flowing out of crypto that doesn't flow in from one other loser, right? And this is not like the traditional economy where there's actually like productive enterprise that actually generates income, right? So if you bought low and sold high, somebody else bought high and sold low. So this is strictly worse than pretty much any other financial product you could possibly buy. They're guaranteed to be more losers than winners, and so crypto assets make a very rubbish investment.
I'd like to add one thing to that. So that's all true, but what's also interesting is there's an opportunity cost to that capital. So instead of putting that capital towards productive assets, it's being put towards a negative-sum game where everyone loses. They lose even a little bit more because if they put that money into, let's say, a venture that actually was innovative, they were building something that was actually useful for society or whatever have you, that's gone. That's gone as well.
It was a rubbish investment.
Thank you for that point. So, where do you think it's going to all go then? What's the future of crypto, or where it ends?
I don't pretend to be like a prophet. I can't predict the future. This stuff has lasted way longer than I ever thought it would. That said, it is an unsustainable market. At some point, it has to collapse. Unless they're given access to public federal money, then maybe we can go on for a long time. That may be their end goal. But every other speculative mania throughout history has ended in ruin, and crypto has all the makings of that. So once proper regulation comes in on these financial assets and we start treating them like securities, like any other kind of stock, the appeal of these investments will go to zero because they offer basically nothing. They are zero-sum, income-free investments with purpose that trade at a very greater pool and have no intrinsic value. Now, you could buy that, but it's not an economically rational thing to do once they become fraudulent in the regulatory perimeter. And once crypto assets basically get regulated, I think it's very clear that most of it will collapse. And after that point, then people will remember, crypto is another footnote like the South Sea Bubble or the other stuff in history. So there's just nothing here.
Yeah, it's very hard to predict when any kind of financial, the movements involve any kind of financial output. But in what I call the real world, there are some fundamentals. The company makes money or it doesn't make money. They can afford to pay the coupon on the bond, or they can't afford to pay the coupon on the bond. That's fundamentals. So even if you can't get the timing exactly right, conventional world, you have at least some idea of where things happen. There are no fundamentals in crypto. It's just a question of how bad things explode when the regulators actually move more firmly, not just on new regulations, but also on enforcement.
I think I actually kind of disagree a little bit with Mark. I think there are fundamentals around it in normal things. So when you look at interest rates and inflation, you look at the whole DeFi thing based on leverage on nothing, right? In terms of the underlying. As soon as the Fed raised interest rates,
It's true.
that went. The Fed is going to continue to raise interest rates as well as all the factors. Yeah, those are macro factors.
It's true. That's a very fair point. I think that influences how things how far down they go. It's not the thing that's ultimately going to eliminate or reduce this to just make it irrelevant noise. But it is a very fair point in terms of macroeconomic trends. Why this bubble has exploded more spectacularly in terms of value destroyed, value lost than previous bubbles is because it has got so leveraged and funded by cheap interest and the ability to have an IPO on a company that doesn't make anything. That has, for that, which is one of the panels, was integration with finance. And yes, it has grown more conventional financial factors, to leverage, people lending, crypto miners and all sorts of people, actual real money. That does have an influence on how high or low it goes, but ultimately I think when it shrivels away, it's very hard to predict.
Yeah, the intrinsic mathematical energy that it doesn't have will eventually put itself out.
So I think this would be my last question to you guys before opening to the floor. What is next for the skeptic community, you would say, to fellow audience and ourselves? Because I'm wondering as well.
Stephen alluded to it earlier. I think there was an NBC article by David Ingram that was saying when we announced it, is that we're not organized, but I think we need to. I think there needs to be more technologists organized to deal with ethics about technology that impact society, and especially when there's money around that, there needs to be a check. That's totally.
So certainly the direction that I'm going to be working on with the foundation that we're spinning up, there is a fundamental need to put technologists in Brussels, in Parliament, and in Congress. So half the reason that crypto exists is because there's this technical obfuscation around innovation in blockchain that any half-decent technologist can cut through like butter, right? If you look at the blockchain, it's just stupid, right? It's like a toilet roll that you can only write on. Like you could explain these things to policymakers in very simple terms, and when it comes from enough credible people like we have with the congressional letter, right, people start listening and they start asking fundamental questions of what the lobbyists are telling them. And the problem right now is that a lot of their staffers and a lot of these politicians everywhere in Europe, in the UK, in the United States, are getting very poor information, and they're making or not making laws based on that. And the problem is there needs to be more technologists talking with these people, and a lot of it is because the technologists simply live in their own kind of little bubble sometimes, and we need to break out the bubble and run things like this event and start talking with people in the halls of power, start bringing our message to them, because who better to understand technology regulation than technologists?
As was demonstrated in my assistance to the symposium, I'm probably not as organised as you guys, but just tell me what you need to do to help.
So I think Jean and I had the video that we kind of shot the other day and showed at the end of the stream conference. But we're looking for people to sign up. We already have some people in the States. We're looking for people who want to be part of the board that are technologists or understand policy or are interested in that. We have a website for that. It's John, you remember what it's? Emerging Tech Center. So there's an email address, you can just put it in there and they'll reach out to you and see what you're about.
crypto skepticism is here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We're only becoming more organized and more powerful. And this conference is a testament to that. 6 months ago, this could never have happened, and now we're getting very serious, and crypto lobby should beware.
When do we sell our own coin? What would you all do?
That was the whole
I think there's so I'm a big fan of Bitcoin on Reddit, so shout out to those guys.
Me and Martin are secretly running a very long con, actually. We're trying to get Congress to destroy all of our enemies. That's actually 27-dimensional chess here.
I thought I'm already a millionaire, waiting to be a billionaire, as already invested. So anyway, I'll open up to the floor. We're having fun here, but until somebody got here, you go. First question.
Thank you. I wanted to ask how you view the role of the so-called stable coin or stable coins in some of the mechanisms that you've just been describing as sort of ultimate decline. Does it change the trajectory that you think the kind of mainstream crypto market will take? What is the ultimate role of the stable coin in the ecosystem as you see it?
I'll speak to that. So stablecoins, for people who don't know, are crypto assets that are pegged one-to-one with the national currency. So there's like a variety of different types of stablecoins. There's on-chain collateralized, off-chain collateralized, and algorithmic stablecoins. Algorithmic stablecoins are a terrible idea, as evidenced by the Terra Luna collapse. These will never work. They are the financial equivalent of cold fusion. Perpetual motion machine. The off-chain collateralized stablecoins are a poor imitation of commercial bank deposits, and they're not solving a real problem. You're in the UK. If I want to pull up my phone and send you money, can I not do that in 10 seconds? Right? You know, what is a stablecoin actually solving? Right? It's basically a derivative of the pound with counterparty risk. And the only reason that people use stablecoins is because they want to move money to offshore crypto exchanges beyond the kind of KYC AML regime and use that to speculate on other crypto assets or to evade paying taxes. Stablecoins are a solution to the crypto ecosystem being not able to get banking access. And what retail problem do they actually solve? Can I not move money around? Do we not have banks that work? Can we not, transact to buy my coffee in the morning? No, stablecoins will solve the real problem.
I'd like to add to that, there's I think John Reed Stark, said something about that. I also kind of think similar. Or actually no, it's Brad Sherman. It is probably the most, if this is the UK, if you support stable coins in the UK and you're a UK citizen, it's the most anti-UK thing you can do. If you're an American, it's the most anti-American thing you can do, because stable coins, at least to me, are tandem to counterfeiting. Not exactly, but in a way, it's almost like you're putting energy and belief into this thing that does not support. You're putting the hands of power into the hands of a select few, as opposed to a government for the people, by the people.
There's a really great book from Australian Brett Scott, who wrote a book called Cloud Money, and he calls stablecoins a parasite on national currency. I tend to agree.
Yeah, I think there's just the one thing I'd add is the stablecoins are another crypto product that hides behind a layer of technical complexity. They're fundamentally quasi-bank accounts or quasi-systems, but they're not regulated like real-world payment systems or real-world bank accounts, which makes them fundamentally stable from both an operational and also from an economic perspective. I think there's one thing to your new group I'd love to see is actually to teach politicians and regulators who are not from the technical background look past the technology, look at what is this thing. This is a quasi-bank that doesn't have capital, it's offshore, it's doing all kinds of things, doing lending. Why isn't that regulated like a normal bank or a normal payments company? Because there's no economic fundamental differences, there's just a hell of a lot more risk.
So
So there's a lot of narratives around this stuff, right, that boosters like to boost. When you're talking to policymakers or decision makers of some kind, and they might have a few of these narratives in their head that they believe in, what would you say is the most compelling of these narratives to them? And what is a good way of dispelling those particular narratives?
I think, at least in my perspective, economic history is probably the best way to explain these things. If the person I'm talking to is not technical, there's no amount of more technical explanation I'm going to give that they're going to understand. But if I equate it in analogy or metaphors with historical examples of economics situations where, hey, someone tried to make this money on their own, this private money on their own, and did not go well. They start to understand that. They start to see the parallels.
The question was, what is the most compelling story to policymakers? And it's going to depend on the country. I think in the United States, there's a sort of passing interest in stablecoins simply because payments infrastructure is a bit more antiquated there. Here in the UK, we're very blessed to have things like payments in Europe. So payments are working a lot better here in Southeast Asia as well. And then in the United States, where things will still take like 3 or 4 days to clear. And so I think there's some sort of passing interest from some policymakers in the United States that maybe stablecoins could be an answer to some of the payment woes that this feels. Unfortunately, they don't even look at their sort of closest allies here in Europe to see how you can build these kind of systems that don't rely on blockchain. And stablecoins, the reason that are products, stablecoins are not the solution in the United States. Basically getting a real-time payment system, which is in the works. Unfortunately, it's been in the works for about 10 years now. Actually, I learned the other day that the Bank of Tanzania put together a real-time payment system in 8 months. And it's taken the United States 10 years, and they still can't get this right. So, you know, once that becomes sort of a non-issue anymore, I think the stablecoin issue becomes sort of mute. And then you have to look at the speculative assets. And, you know, there aren't too many politicians that are not sort of libertarian nutters that think that Bitcoin is a good idea. It looks like just listen to The Economist, they'll like it's an asset. So it becomes a lot harder pill to swallow than speculative should have any kind of place in order. And once you get rid of stablecoins and all speculative crypto assets, and it's not like this is blockchain, and blockchain is bullshit.
I think in general, the two most compelling arguments. Two main compelling arguments that lobby are using politicians are policymakers. One, it's going to bring money to jobs. It's a very hard argument to argue against. You actually look through the reality. The other one is we're in an age where people love talking about technology, software, computers. We love talking about software's eating the world, data's the new oil, whatever. When people come along with that narrative, politicians who don't necessarily have either personal background or the advisors to act through some of this nonsense, very, very hard, very, very hard story to.
Also, I would like to add, like countries like El Salvador, what they would do is the newly elected politicians, instead of fighting against the already existing and stable technocrats, they create their own wallet, which is depository in the sense of central bank. Then they tell their constituencies to use it. But I'm sure if you ask now a moms and pop shop in the corner, I'm sure they agree with me nowadays after they lost their vote.
Leading out with the University of Oxford. Congratulations, gentlemen, for pulling together this one. I think is a very important event. And thank you, and also to everyone else here, I think, for inserting skepticism into this conversation that, as you very well noted, is just driven by these extremely well-funded lobbyists for the most part. The question, what is the role of journalism historically and going forward in this phenomenon we know as crypto? Thank you.
So I want to thank Bill Lund, who who was one of our speakers. He gave a really excellent panel on the politics of crypto, which you guys should all watch because it's on YouTube now. It was a really good conversation. So, journalism is a pillar of democracy. Its role is to inform the public and to kind of cut through much of the noise. To be honest, I think, I'll be very candid here, I think I've lost a lot of faith in journalism's role to do that, given the speculative mania of, I think there are certain outlets, we have some people here from the Financial Times that have done some really, really great reporting on crypto. Unfortunately, the average lay public is not reading the Financial Times. They're getting their information from social media, they're getting their information from their friends, and there's an inherent selection bias they're getting from those sources. You always want to hear about the one person that made, $1 million off this thing, and you'll never hear about, the 10,000. And these things are genuinely wrapped in levels of obfuscation, complexity, and jargon that you can't really deconstruct in 10,000 word articles. And so it's kind of like a denial of service attack against sort of collective sense-making. And I wish long form journalism existed and that people had the attention span to sit down and read maybe my book right over there, which deconstructs this intellectually, but I don't think journalism, it needs to get a lot better at dealing with market manias. And if you look at history, go all the way back to the 1700s, there were articles in, the Times of London at the time about, the South Sea Company being, kind of fraudulent, and it didn't stop it then, and then it's not stopping it now, so maybe this is just an intrinsic part. Every generation just has to learn this for themselves, and that there isn't this kind of collective sense-making. But maybe if there is, it's conferences like this, where we gather together people to, hear from your peers. And maybe that's a better effective tool, but I don't have the answers to that fully.
I think it's a bit tricky because being a journalist in this day and age doesn't mean you necessarily have to write long form things. And also, it's based on your ability to understand the field or the subject that you're working on, and it might be something that's so, there's two sides to it, right? There's one, for crypto at least, there's one on the technical side that might not be your forte to understand that. So you rely on everyone telling you what that is. And also your peer network, like you were saying, is, friends might be making money on it or losing money on it, but you're going to hear from that, and based on that, you're going to make your own assumptions and write it that way. It's a tricky thing for journalists.
So, I spent quite a lot of time talking to journalists, especially Financial Times and crypto. One of the things that's always struck me about those conversations, maybe it's a misrepresentative sample, is always asking questions, not just get to a story, but to actually understand. So I think some of that education gap, which is needed for policymakers, politicians, for the mainstream press. I think so that's the good end. But on the bad end, I think there's been something which Gerard over there has touched on in terms of crypto press, which is this very large group of organisations which
right next to me.
One next to you. But most of it exists to promote the crypto industry. And it generates a lot of content which gets picked up by the mainstream press. But most of the crypto press is there to promote crypto. That's just a fact. It's one side, and just all this content, and it's like, and again, I'm channeling David Gerard here. If the gardening correspondent at the Times wants to find out more, and they go to the specialist gardening press, they're specialists in gardening. If they want to find out more about crypto, and they go to the specialist crypto press, most likely going to get just promotional stuff about crypto.
They're
paid to do it.
If they're paid to do it, they're probably not going to say anything bad on it.
So I talk with the press a lot too, and one thing that frustrates me, and we have some members of the press here, is this perpetual need to tell both sides of the story, even when one side is completely absurd. Like if I'm going to do both sides story on astrology, or homeopathy that water can cure cancer, there's not two sides to the story. It's just one side is just false, right? Some things are true and false. Like there's not, we don't need to cover both sides as if they're both rational positions here. And with these crypto assets, a lot of times when I talk to these rather sensible outlets and rather sensible people, they're like, well, tell me something good about Yo-Yo Coin 7. No, Yo-Yo Coin 7 is just a scam. Anyone with half a brain can see why it's a scam. But then you run this piece and it's like, oh, then we brought on this, Nobel Prize winning economist and this complete nut job to kind of both sides of the story. And that's a lot of the reason that crypto exists, because a lot of the media has this kind of false equivalency narrative. And no, sometimes there's just things that are economically absurd. A lot of crypto is technically economically absurd. I think David's done a really good job of just calling it out sometimes when it actually is. It really is that stupid.
Just a note, it's not just crypto with journalism.
Yeah, it's a systemic problem.
Yeah.
There was a question there.
Couple of things. Firstly, as someone who actually works occasionally in the media, I would share that basically, with all due respect to my other colleagues here, almost none of them have any experience in the thing they write about at all. I was recently talking to a BBC economics correspondent dedicated to deal with crypto. She was a year and a bit out of doing a degree in French. I can't. So when she, how someone that can even comprehend the words is somewhat confusing. But we talked a lot about American regulators and their vagaries. What's your perspective on British regulators and politicians? Do you see them as better, worse, wrong in a different dimension?
I think the British version is I would say I'm not an expert at British politics, but I really think that there's a lot of new people. I think what was her name? Truss. It was Truss. Whatever her name is. Very biased towards. Very biased towards crypto, right? Because we're probably making money off it somehow, or being paid to show this, but. At the same time, what do you think the people in the Bank of England think? I think they're probably more old school, traditional, understand economic history, and are very against it. So I think generally speaking, that's what I think. I really don't know about the MPs and what they think. I'll leave it up to Mark.
Well, I think in general, financial regulation, particularly enforcement of regulation over the last 20 odd years, US regulators have taken act first when they see a problem, and they've acted more firmly with whatever part of finance they've acted, whether it's crypto or not. And I think we're seeing the same pattern again. I think one of the, particularly for the UK regulators and also for some of the European regulators, is one of the things I noticed creeping in over the last few years is actually confusing the mandated regulators. So a lot of the regulators somehow, in spite of the great financial crisis, financial innovation seems to be encouraging financial innovations to become part of their mandate. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with financial innovation, but it's very hard financial regulation to simultaneously control the system and encourage innovation. There's other parts of the public sector and the government who could, by all means, be encouraging innovation, but that's actually made it really, really hard. The FCA, for instance, has actually been told you're supposed to be encouraging innovation, not crushing it.
I also think if you go around London, you will see some cards issued to people and they're spending it day to day in the name of getting cash back. It's not even regulated by FCA. And to know this, there's no need to be genius. You can just search it on FCA's website and it says openly they're not regulated. And for me, it's like, it shows the gap that they have to catch up and stop them, because tomorrow, if it's gone, there's no doors to knock, because in your regular high street banks now, your depository is protected. So I don't know when they're gonna catch up. Any more questions?
I'd like to.
It's working.
I'd like to express my gratitude to the panel for organizing this symposium. We've been talking about crypto and blockchain, and two companies utilizing blockchain are Helium and the Render Network. And I'd like to ask the panel if these two products are net benefit to society or net negative.
So you said Helium, and what was the other one?
Render Network.
I don't know about that one, but I'll talk about helium because I remember looking at it myself and being like, maybe there's something there. It's not. Even they admitted it because they got off the coins, I believe, recently. Like helium itself stopped doing it with crypto.
Maybe you want to give a background of what is.
Oh, helium is sorry. Helium is this. It's supposed to be like a mesh network that you have. You can whore out your Wi-Fi to everyone else's, and then they look at you. Yeah. But the thing is, you could do that. So this is the argument I would say for most of these kind of things. With what you could do with crypto, you could do with traditional technology without crypto. So, is there really a benefit aside from speculative fervor and then hyping a coin with it? Really?
So Helium Network is basically a way of what if you could sell shares in your Wi-Fi network, right, and sell it to other people? Now, number one, there's basically no demand for this. Like everywhere I go, I have Wi-Fi or cellular signal, and I don't really want to pay to hijack my neighbor's Wi-Fi. It's not a use case that actually exists. But it turns out if you take something absurd, attach a speculative coin to it, and the story kind of gives it this kind of tenuous utility, then apparently people will dump money into it. And that's exactly what happened. So there's basically no demand for the Helium service, but there's a lot of demand for the Helium speculative token completely detached from the service.
How much was it? Did they like $3,000 or something?
Yeah, so all of the crypto space basically looks like this. It's basically things that are masquerading as actually doing something, but they're actually basically just a gambling token attached. Now, even if there was a demand for like Helium as a service, there's nothing you would do that you couldn't do with pounds or dollars, right? If I really wanted to buy an hour of Wi-Fi time, I can go down to like BT Wi-Fi or buy 1 hour of Wi-Fi. It's not like this is a hard problem. So, what exactly is this solving? Other than basically providing, a unregistered security for people to for a bunch of venture capitalists to dump on the public and use the public as an exit and to be using this sort of tenuous story as sort of the veneer of it not being security.
Don't forget the fraud.
Always a bit of fraud, just a little bit.
They just lied about their deals. A small lie, you understand.
So there's a big Twitter thread that went viral about this company allegedly having a bunch of strategic partnerships with some companies, and it turns out after some investigations that was not a true statement.
I really don't know enough about either to actually comment. So that's what us crypto skeptics.
I think it was just the underlying kind of foundations of it.
I think.
I have a good question. Can I ask it?
You can ask it.
Go on. I know. I was just wondering about your relationship with policymakers, regulators, whether you're engaging with them on a regular basis, feel like you're being listened to, or obviously this is an example of being listened to historically.
From the crypto press.
He writes for Mel.
Okay.
Magazine for me. He writes for real magazines, as well as Decrypt. I love Decrypt, they're great. Because they pay us. They do, they pay on time. They do pay on time. Anything you can say about a magazine that pays on time.
Okay. Certainly, crypto skeptics have become more involved in expressing our sentiments to policymakers. You saw this with the congressional letter where over 1,000 wrote to Congress directly to tell them what we actually thought about crypto and blockchain. And I will say, on the back of that, we've had some very, very productive conversations on both sides of the pond. And policymakers are starting to listen. You've seen that evidenced by the fact that we have people from the highest echelons of power speaking at our conference now. Members of Parliament and members of Congress saying things that, like many of our panelists are saying, because they share our perspectives. And they share the same goals as us, which are ultimately about protecting the public. And this entire conference is about the same thing that policymakers want to do, is ensuring public protections, protecting capital markets, and ensuring that the public interest is represented in policy.
I think we should call it an end. The last tricks are at the back. And thank you very much for coming. And thank you very much for hosting us homegrown. I'm a happy member of our family.